Hello, everybody. Welcome to season three. What? Season three of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, the Fawn Pod, the Fawncast, where we make fun of Justin's ass. Let's get going here, everybody. It's episode 105. That was actually me. That wasn't even an AI one. So there's that. We are talking about a little indie game today as we get back into an indie showcase episode here for a video game. Apparently, three of us played and one of us lied and didn't tell the other three that they played, but we have four hosts in the house tonight. Holy cow.
Woo.
What the hell's going on here? What a banner start to season three. Let's jump into this. We have Joe, Justin, and Brett with us here today. And ironically, this is a game that Dave would have loved. So there we go. That's all
Hey,
of us.
we tried. We tried
We
to
did
get you guys
try.
to do
Maybe he'll pop in halfway through the podcast. I don't know.
it.
But let's see what everybody's been up to here. And we'll check out what we've been doing for the last week or so. On my screen, Joe's on top. So why don't you kick it off, Joe? What have you been up to?
That's right. I'm on top. Well, I've kind of been telling you guys about this in our ongoing chat, but I have been spending a lot of time recently playing a game that it kind of has surprised me that I'm playing this game, and that is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, which I think it originally came out in 2015. Is that right? You guys would probably know more than me. I think that's
Sounds
right.
right. Sounds right.
But at the time it came out, it was like a huge deal. Obviously, everyone heralded it as the greatest Zelda game ever made, if not the greatest video game ever made. I have just never been a fan of the Zelda series. I've tried playing various incarnations and they've just never really gotten their hooks in me. And I tried Breath of the Wild when it first came out because a lot of reviews said that like this was the Zelda game that was going to win over people that were not fans of the franchise. And I bounced off it hard. But for some reason, a couple weeks ago now, I was bored of a weekend afternoon and was trying to figure out what to do. So I was like, I own this game. I might as well give it another shot. And for some reason, it just kind of clicked. So I've been dumping hours into that, and I'm kind of mad about how much I'm enjoying it. And then the other thing I just wanted to give a quick mention to, I spent like a significant portion of my night last night watching one and a half of the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings movies, which is something I try to usually do once a year, but I didn't really get around to it last year at all. So kind of try to make up for that, but I always recommend checking those out and always recommend the the rare case where an extended edition of a film is actually superior to the original and the added content is justified in existing. So highly recommend if you've never sat down and watched those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Justin, you're next on my screen going down here. What have you been up to?
Uh,
Besides
well,
global warming.
you knew I was going to say that, didn't you?
Well, I had a hunch, but
Yeah. I've been watching these the snow that we're supposed to have around this time of year gradually just disappear. Watching races, various sorts like sled dog races, ski races, that sort of thing, that normally bring in a lot of tourists, a lot of tourist money, keep businesses afloat during the winter. I've seen those get canceled. Things are going great up here. Uh, but aside from that, to try and get my mind off of it, I've kind of dove headfirst into something we're going to be covering a few weeks down the line. I don't want to say what it is. I will say it's a game. I will say it's one that has gotten a lot of. It's gained a cult following over the years, and it's kind of a mess, but it's an interesting mess. It's to the point where I had been playing a few other things, but I'm really focusing more and more on this because it's. I haven't really ever played anything quite like it. So stay tuned for when we cover that. It'll probably be a few weeks from now. But yeah, I look forward to that episode. That's kind of been it for me. Otherwise, just more life is normal. People quitting my job, trying to shore up the holes like a sinking ship. How about you, Brett?
Well, after crying for 3 days about how badly our Detroit Lions effed up their chance to get to the Super Bowl. I picked up my self-esteem and I dove back into Cyberpunk. So after 3 years and I think like 2 months, like 3 years and 2 months after this game came out, I finally finished Cyberpunk
Hey.
2077. And I really don't have any. It just was like one of those situations where, like every time I played it, I enjoyed it, but then something would come along and I'd be like, all right, I'll just break off of it for a bit and play this other thing, and I never came back to it. And then like months would go by, and I'd be like, shit, okay, I gotta go back and play that, and I'd start a new game, like a new iteration of it, and then I'd play, and something else would come. I'd be like, I'd jump off. Anyways, long story short, I finally finished it, and if if you still have reservations about playing it, because of how poorly the release was handled, um, it is now a great game. Like it's legitimately an awesome game to play. Um, the story since from day one, the story has been really good, like really enjoyable. The characters are fun. The voice acting is great. Um, and the visuals and the aesthetics of Night City, this fictional futuristic city, have always been great as well. And they fixed all the, as far as I can tell, all the bugs. I haven't run into any like major bugs at all now. And they put in a ton of the features that they originally promised that they were going to do, and it's a very deep like action adventure RPG with this futuristic slant to it. So I in fact, after I finished that playthrough, I immediately started another one with a different character, because there's you got 3 origin story options and there's 5 total endings to get. So it definitely has replayability. I'm trying like a completely different build as well. I'm going for like a melee, like ninja kind of build this time. So great game. I would definitely recommend that to anybody who is into that kind of thing. So
Awesome.
how about you, Cody?
I just been up to a few things that I guess I would label as, and I'm finally getting to these. So I did finally finish a series Brett had recommended called Obliteration on is it Obliteration or Obliterated?
Obliterated.
Obliterated on Netflix, which was a really fun jaunt of like trying to save the world with a bunch of people who are not really capable of doing such
It's a
things.
wild ride.
It was good. There were some times where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to stick with this or not, but it was good. Every time I'd stay with it, I was laughing my ass off, or some bizarre situation would come along, and it was just really entertaining all the way through. So that was really fun. Karen and I have been slowly getting into more episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds finally for you, Joe.
Yay.
I think we're on episode 9 maybe now of season 1, so that has started to be a thing we're doing as well. Still not entirely sold on some of the characters in the show.
Ooh.
They haven't grown on me fully yet, but there are some I definitely enjoy. In the cast as well. There's some I just don't like. The Doctor, I'm still not sold on the Doctor, and number one basically also not sold on her. But there's some other ones I like with
I can't really defend number 1, but I will say that in general, I think season 2 is better than season 1, and it also further develops most of the characters at least.
Okay. I know Karen really likes what's the girl with the shaved sides on her head.
Ortegas.
Yeah, she really likes her. I really like Chapel, and Uhura is really good in the show. And still not entirely sold on Pike himself, actually, which is probably one of the drawbacks of the whole thing.
I love Space Daddy.
It's kind of a weird tone to the show because it does kind of feel like it's straddling, I don't know, almost like the type of show the original series would have been, but like with a more serious take most of the time, more like next gen, and but all updated for like to look modern. So it's kind of a weird middle ground for a lot of it, but enjoying it so far. We're going through that. And then video game wise, I've also been picking back up on Fire Emblem, Engage, trying to get through that still, playing a couple missions here and there. And then I also have started Alan Wake, which I think is a brand new game that just came out. So just kidding, but way behind the times. I picked that up in one of the recent Nintendo Switch sales, and I have some major complaints with the game. as far as some of the combat methods in the game, how enemies attack, some of the options you have as the person traversing the world. And the story has me both intrigued and also seems really sloppy at the moment. So I'm intrigued to see what my final rating for that game is going to be. But I've been kind of doing like 2 hour spurts of that game as time's gone on too. So a
If
little bit
you'd
of
like
watching,
to,
a little bit of playing.
if you'd like to do like a classic or crap episode on that, I would be down for debating that game with you at some point
Okay.
if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. That
Cool.
sounds good. That sounds good. All right. Well, we are here to kick off season 3 with a little indie game that we somehow settled on. I think we had, is this where we had like 5 or 6 we were debating between, and then we finally picked one, and this was the one we picked? Sounds right in my head.
That sounds right.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is not the Curse of the Golden Idol, but it is the Case of the Golden Idol. Bum, bum, bum.
I got a bad case of the Golden Idol, if you know what I mean.
They make a
Yeah.
cream for that now.
See you, doctor. All right. Case of the Golden Idol. So, just some background info on this before we get into some thoughts and feelings on this bad boy. This came out in 2022. I just wrote a little intro here. This is by a company that developed it called Color Gray Games, which is essentially 2 independent Latvian game developers who were inspired by the games Return of Obra Dinn and Her Story. One of those 2 you may see in a future podcast here.
What?
I know. Published by a company called Playstack. This came out on all computer systems, Windows and Mac 2022, was released on Nintendo Switch 2023. Basically a adventure, puzzler, detective story type game.
Honestly
Overall,
surprised the Switch had the processing power to handle this game.
I think that's a joke.
It was
The
processing.
processing. Metacritic scores on this one. The 2022 computer versions has a Metacritic 84 out of 100, and the Switch version has a 93 out of 100. So we'll see if we agree with that or not. A couple other things here on this one. It was nominated as one of the best puzzle games of 2022 on the basis of its, quote, refreshing take on murder mystery genre and gameplay. PC Gamer awarded the game as the best story of the year, praising deep and fascinating narrative surrounding the idol, its history and powers. And Polygon said, one of the best games of 2022 that expertly supports you through the trial and error of detective work with an excellent payoff and epilogue. And the New Yorker said it was one of the best games of the year. It was a riveting detective game and a sophisticated Sherlockian story about wealth and greed delivered in a way that rewards close attention. So there's all that. Gameplay in this one is kind of unique. We've done a couple of these unique games for these indie showcase episodes, but essentially this one has more or less 2 modes to it, if you want to think of it that way. A couple websites I was on called them, I think, exploring mode and thinking mode. Exploring mode being walking around the world, and thinking mode being kind of pulling up your quote unquote detective notebook, I guess, to try to fill in the plot and the words as you were. But kind of a unique situation for this, where each of the cases you play, and I think there were 12 in the original game. Sounds right, or 11 in an epilogue, I think.
Yeah, 11 and
Yeah,
epilogue.
yeah.
And essentially this had total brain fart right there. Had something. But anyway, basically you're going around as you're looking at like a single moment in time almost, which is kind of interesting. Like you're kind of like this third person omniscient detective who's going around and kind of pausing a moment in time to go around and see what's happening all around the different locations to try to figure out like who's saying what and where stuff is. But you never really are watching like a scene play out in this, right? Like it's a static moment in time, which is, I thought, kind of cool, really, that they could make the case with just one moment in time on these. But essentially, the short version is you're going around trying to find words, either from dialogue or like on a clue you see somewhere, on a note that you find or whatever, and you're adding some words into your, I don't know, I just called it a tableau for the sake of ease here, but your detective notebook, I guess. And then you're going to use those words to fill in the blanks to try to solve some mysteries, kind of summarize what had happened in the scene, what people's motivations were, what kind of weapons they used, who killed who type thing. Because all of these, is it every case that someone dies? Is someone dying every single one?
I'm pretty
I
sure.
think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Not
And then
my people.
and then there's a system where once you put your words into the fill in the blanks, you could like basically get checked right away. And if you have not enough right, then it's just going to say you're wrong. If you have two or less correct, a little thing will come up to say you have two or less correct, and you can kind of play around. Or if you have them all right, it'll indicate that as well. And like that section of your detective notebook, your tableau will lock basically with the right answer. And cases usually had anywhere from like 3 to 6 different sections you had to fill in essentially.
Mhm.
Some were far more complex than others, but and then just this is just the base game, and then we'll talk about the DLC a little bit here as well. But the base game is about 50 years worth of time that it goes through, primarily with this family called the Cloudsley family and their associates. But what starts as kind of a simple little plot gets pretty crazy by the end with like secret societies and dual identities and political machinations and all these things. And the end of all of this, I'll just say to summarize this part here and finish up, is we have a massive stage for that last stage that you play in the regular game, where the idol breaks at the end of the story here, which does leave me with some questions about its sequel, which comes out this year. And the sequel takes place in the 1970s and has 15 cases in the new game that'll come out here in 2024. So I'm curious how they're going to link what happened at the end of this to this other one, because this game really was big on story, like things connected from case to case and person to person. And I mean, it's definitely a linear narrative you get as you go through these. So, okay, that's basically my overview. Anything I missed that you guys want to add in prior to some individual pros and cons and things like that?
That felt like a pretty complete description of how of what the game was. So to me,
Justin looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah,
He's just
it was
trying to figure out how to use Zoom.
I think I'm younger than you are. Shut up. I was going to just actually talk a little about the visual style of the game, because
Yeah,
I
go
don't
for
think
it.
you mentioned that. So it's presented in a very retro kind of way, not quite 8-bit, but very much pixel art. So you've got these kind of chunky, blocky characters, and yet they still have a lot of personality. They have a lot of life to them, despite being, rendered in, a relatively low resolution. And I feel that the way it's presented actually does lend a lot to the game, just because it gives the story a little bit of a surreal feel at times, just because everything does look a little bit off. And considering the events that do play out, I think that suits it well, because things do get a little weird in this game. Don't want to necessarily spoil anything right now until we get to where we're talking about details, but I liked the presentation, is what I was going to say. And I don't think it hampered things where it was hard to make stuff out. Have played a few retro style games where it was a little too blocky. This one, I think it presented everything in a very digestible fashion.
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
One thing I might add on to that is I did enjoy the pixel art, the retro look to it. Although at times, like some of the a few faces in particular seem to be like so odd, like they're almost like they're drawn poorly on purpose.
I feel like David Gorin looked different like every single time we saw him. There are like a couple characters like that
right.
where it's
There were
like,
like
what?
little changes that made them almost like hard to recognize. Um, like some of them were even like kind of like unpleasant to look at to that point. But
Yeah, some of the characters were a little grotesque, like the way that they're drawn.
one guy had like his eyes were like pointing two different
Yeah.
directions.
Yes.
Love it.
But I think that was, I mean, a deliberate stylistic choice. I
Yeah.
mean, because you are dealing with a game that focuses on murder and like cloak and dagger plotting behind the scenes and stuff. So having that little
Literally.
bit of comedy or just bizarre visual comedy there, I think helps a bit.
I saw a few websites that compared the graphics to like one of the old 90s LucasArts style games, which I thought was pretty apt. It's right about there.
So I don't know, like I don't know if this is where I should mention that, but
Mention it. Let's do it.
well, so I think originally Cody and Justin, you guys had said that you were, doing the podcast about this game, and what got me interested in it was I Googled it and looked at some of the screenshots, and I thought the art style also looked reminiscent of like the early LucasArts point and click adventure games. And reading a description of this game, it, at least on the Wikipedia, describes it as an adventure game. So I was like, oh, cool. This is a point and click adventure game. This is not at all a point and click adventure game. So I was kind of like falsely lured into it by like the art style and, the word adventure being there.
Haha.
But, in terms of the actual gameplay, there's some similarities, I guess, but it is very different from like what you would think of as a point and click adventure.
Yeah, that's a good thing to get out. You're just cycling between a few different scenes, static scenes that you're looking at. So
Yeah.
not
That's true. It's not like you don't really use items on things in the world. It's it's not like the Secret of Monkey Island where, you find a rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle and you use it to, zip line across to a
Yeah.
little remote island. It's
like your character isn't actually like traversing anywhere. They're just you're looking at pictures, like a scene,
Yeah.
like say.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess it's more about it's less about figuring out what you need to do in order to advance the plot and more just figuring out what happened in this frozen moment in time, like in the past. It's like looking back instead of trying to move forward.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good summary. All right. Does anybody, I want to talk about positives and negatives and a couple neutral thoughts I have, but does anybody else have anything else they want to put out about the game prior to that, or do we just want to get to that part?
I'm fine diving in.
Jump into it.
All right. Well, let's start with let's go with some positive first, I guess. So I had a lot of positives for this one that I wrote down here, but one of the first things I enjoyed about this game is the time period and the setting I actually was kind of attracted to because it was not set in modern times. I mean, this is obviously an older time period. I mean, I don't know if they gave us a year and then they may have, but you're picking up like maybe some colonial to like mid 1800s type vibes with
I
this,
think
with
it's
like
like the
Yeah.
1750s.
I was gonna say
1750s.
like that.
somewhere in that range. There was like a few date clues that you had to use, and like
Okay.
Letters sent between people that you could
Yeah.
glean that from.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that it was just a different time period that I don't feel like I've played a lot of games from, and it kind of everything looked that way. So that was kind of first thing that attracted me here. You want me to keep going, or do you guys want to chime in and rotate around on this?
One of the first things I wrote down about it was that the music felt enjoyable, like right from the start. I was like, oh, this is, it's kind of like pulling me in like right away. I thought that was done pretty well.
Yeah, and
I think it continued through the whole game pretty well like that, I think.
Yeah, I definitely. I like the music, though, depending on how long it took to solve each scene, it can get a little monotonous after a while.
True. I will say regarding the setting, yeah, this whole thing does have a very like pulpy action story kind of feel to it. Even though there's not a whole lot of action that directly takes place, it definitely feels like something from the pulp fiction like Tarzan or Doc Savage, that sort of thing, set earlier in time, but it had a lot of that energy, a lot of that personality to it, which I thought was kind of neat because you, like Cody said, you don't see a lot of that in games these days. And yeah, it was a nice change of pace.
Joe,
I
you got
agree.
a positive?
Nope. Let's
Okay.
go on. Let's move on. Nope, I do. I mean, could this be like any positive about the
Yeah.
game? All right. I mean, honestly, I think one of the things that maybe I had a little more experience with in this game than you guys did is the hint system, which I thought. I mean, we'll talk about the DLCs in a little bit, but at least for the main game, I thought that the hint system was kind of ingenious. And so the way the hint system in this game works is if you decide you need a hint for a particular case, first they make you earn it by basically doing this like matching game, where it presents, it's like, I don't know how many, like 12 or more. There's like pictures of different things on one side and words on the in a column on the right side. And you basically just have to like drag and click the word to like the picture that it corresponds to, which at first glance seems kind of just pointless, but at least my take on it, I'm pretty sure that it's a way I feel like it's the developers like trying to get you to remember people's names, but also teaching you like what different inanimate objects in the game are, because it's like, you'll have like, because there are like different types of bladed weapons in the game. There's a knife, there are knives, daggers, stilettos. There's the katar, which is like, the more exotic one. And so, to me, at least, this matching game kind of teaches you not only like the differentiation between those different objects that you keep encountering throughout the game, but also kind of that you need to pay attention to the fact that there are differences between these things. So kind of not even remotely overtly, it's, kind of teaching you how to play the game better. And then once you pass that sequence, you get to choose what type of hint you want. Depending on the scene that you're in, there are like varying numbers of hints available. But it'll say, it'll present you like four or however many options, and it'll be like, do you want a hint related to the sequence of events or related to the characters or whatever?
Huh.
And the hints themselves I like because they try to point you, like nudge you in the right direction, but they do not give anything away at all. Like, it's not like you go through this and get the hint and they just like give you an answer. It
True.
still is, it very much is like, consider this, it'll kind of nudge you towards finding or figuring out the solution to a given puzzle, but you still really have to like think about what it says and go back and look through you know, your tableau, as Cody's calling it, and things like that. So I like that. I think in the main game, the hint system is very helpful without just giving you the answer, which, I mean, that wouldn't be very satisfying at all.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I had the hint system as my only thing that was a neutral for me.
Hmm.
I do think I at first I did I didn't use hints for a very long time in the game because I was trying to do it without hints, but then I got some cases where I was like, I just need a little help on this one thing. And then after that I started to use it more because the cases got harder. But I was trying to find um different help with the cases, and I don't know that the hints always gave you that much help. Sometimes you do it all to get the clue, and then I was like, well, I already knew that part of it. Like I need a different part to help answer this. And then like the matching thing you're talking about, I did enjoy that. It wasn't just like you get a free hint, but then like after I did that like 3 or 4 times, I was like, all right, I know who everybody is. I don't want to keep doing this matching thing. Like
Hmm.
I got to figure it out. But
Yeah. I mean,
you,
I should say like the matching, the like, especially the people who appear in the matching game change over the course. Like, you're not going to see people that you haven't encountered yet in the scenes. So like I feel like there's still some value in that, but it does feel a little too repetitive as you get later.
yeah, and we can talk about the hint system when we get to the DLC in a little bit here.
Oh, we sure can.
Oh, we sure can. We sure can. Positives, more positives for me here. I actually thought the game really did do kind of a nice job of making you feel like you were a detective and piecing something together, and more so than probably most games I've played where that's the case. It did feel like, I mean, it's sort of like a visual logic problem almost, or something like that, where you're like just trying to figure out which pieces fit where in to make this story make sense. But just like the slight process of discovering clues and figuring out where they go and trying different things and trying to figure out what the story was, did kind of make me feel like I was a detective. So I kind of get the Sherlock reference there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I felt a pretty strong sense of satisfaction at least a few times, when something finally clicked in my brain as far as, how to use specific clues. And it's not a feeling. I mean, to be fair, I have not played a lot of games in this style, like detective or, puzzle games like this, but I did feel like it really captured, the feeling of being a detective, putting this together, and the exhilaration you get when, you know that you figured something out.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree there. There's almost like at times a Scooby-Doo element, where they're unmasking the villain. It's
Yeah.
like, it was Old Man Cloudsley all along, that sort of thing. And
Oh
uh,
man.
Yeah.
yeah. When everything is flowing right in this game, it's very satisfying. Um, that said, well, we'll talk about how well things flow a bit later, I suppose. But yeah, I do feel that in the best of the cases, yeah, it really does feel like everything is laid out just perfectly so that you can trace all the steps and get to the answer yourself without it feeling like it's contrived or using the sort of moon logic you see in a lot of earlier adventure games where stuff doesn't quite make sense, but this is what you go with. So.
Yeah.
One thing that I had as actually both a positive and a negative, if it can be that, is the fact that you can just brute force the puzzles in areas.
Yeah.
So like for example, if you have 4 open slots left to put a clue into and you have 4 possibilities to go in there, you can just keep rearranging them until it works. And just be like, well, okay, I'm done. Which if you're like really stuck on something is nice because you can then get past it using a minimum bit amount of logic and just figure that out, but also lets you in some places just completely bypass doing the work and just like finish something without really
Yeah.
earning it.
I really tried not to do that, but there were a couple of parts where I would not have figured them out if I hadn't just done
Mhm.
what you just described. And
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
feel like there were a couple puzzles that were just poorly designed. Like I don't know how anyone could have just gotten there by piecing everything together.
Yeah. I think I know at least one of the ones you're talking about, and then we'll talk about that when we get to the negatives or the neutrals, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
going back to a positive thing, like this is taking a step back, but just the way the game itself is set up in terms of learning how it works, I think it's structured pretty well. At first, I was a little thrown off because there is no like overt tutorial or anything. You're just thrown into the first scene, and I had no idea what was going on at first, especially since I thought this was going to be a traditional point and click adventure game.
yeah.
Um,
Fair.
but I actually went back earlier today and kind of revisited the first couple scenes, and the first scene, it's one scene. There are only 11 words to find and work with. So, and I mean, it is, looking back retroactively, it is fairly easy to piece those things together in the first one. And then the second scene is still just a singular scene, but it adds more words. And I appreciate the way it kind of like builds up. So you're, getting the hang of things more and more as it starts adding more words and more different scenes within cases and different sorts of complications. I just feel like as far as like structurally, as far as not really holding your hand, but like making sure that you're not going to be just completely overwhelmed. I feel like they designed it well in that regard.
I would definitely agree. I put the first case down as one of my positives also because it really, like you said, kind of taught you how to play the game right away. And then I didn't think about it past that, but you are right. Like, each new stage you'd get to, you'd be like, oh, I finished this one. And then you'd open the next one and you'd be like, oh, okay, they're adding this one new thing. I can do this. I can do this still. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
And
definitely agree.
Yeah, and I do like, at least for a good chunk of the game, the variety of the puzzles. Because I mean, some of them are like math puzzles. Some of them are, okay, who was where when. In some scenes, you don't even know where you are at first, and you have to kind of piece it together based on context clues. Like you might see something outside the window in a scene, and there might be a map kind of the overall lay of the land, and you're like, okay, well, this thing I see is only in this area and this area, so I can't be over here. And it's kind of like, just gradually piecing things together sometimes, which is also really interesting and makes you feel accomplished. But for a lot of the game, yeah, you do have to approach what's in front of you from a lot of different angles to actually get to where you're going. Um, it doesn't always, I mean, not all of the puzzles are created equal, but I do like that they tried a lot of different approaches.
Yeah. A few more I had here. Other people can jump in too, but this one just kind of goes along with what you guys have been saying. But I thought the game did a really nice job of like if I was stuck and then I solved one aspect of what the case was, like just getting that one element was enough to like open up the next thing for me to try to, all right, now I can see if I can figure out this next thing because I know this one thing. And the cases were very like laid out logically in that you could solve one element at a time and it would help you with the next one to try to figure out like this is who this is. So now I know that this person was here. If this person was here, then I know that this person did this thing. And so it was well built that way as well. I think that was good. I'll just keep going here. I'll clear mine out. Uh, Maybe the biggest praise I can give for positive in this game is I know we were playing this kind of simultaneously, and I think that naturally probably drives the way I play a little more motivated to go back and keep going and kind of push myself to keep pace with you guys or whatever. But this game definitely made me want to go back and play like the next case as soon as I was done with a case. Which I don't think that it really is the case for many games that I play. Like it's usually if I have time, I'll pick it up and I'll try to squeeze some in here and there. And this one, it was like I stayed up late and didn't get a lot of sleep one night because I wanted to play the next case. I didn't do this thing I was supposed to do this other day because I wanted to get in one more case. And so I think that's, one of the best pieces of praise I can give the game itself. I was just always excited to play it. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think I powered through the main game in like 2 days. And I mean, part of that was because we were all kind of talking about it and playing it together, but I also was just really curious to see where the heck things were going. Like the plot just kind of gets more and more convoluted and crazy as you go along.
facts.
And I just, I was just really curious to see where things were headed.
Um, I will say, yeah, the cases were, overall, at least in the main game, pretty solid. But I also liked the stories within the story, like the interpersonal drama between the characters.
Yeah.
Like, this person's in love with this person, but the person they're in love with hates this other person who is, there's a bunch of that. And one character is just this absolutely slimy little bastard who keeps somehow escaping disaster by the skin of his teeth, usually not even realizing it. Um, there was
Can
one
we
part where
talk
there's
about that? Can we talk about spoilers?
Sure.
okay.
So I
Go on.
absolutely love that at the end, Edmund slash Lazarus, like, just can't keep it in his pants, and that's his ultimate downfall.
Yes.
Like, he goes through all this trouble
Mhm.
and, like, basically has the key to immortality and builds up this secret society and is on the verge of world domination. But at the end of the day, he's got the hots for his nephew's wife,
Mhm.
and that's what gets him murderfied.
Yep.
Like, I love that twist.
Uh,
Um, I mean, on a related note, was anyone at all surprised by the revelation that Lazarus Hurst was Edmund Cloudsley?
no.
Because I was reading online and like a lot of people said that they didn't catch that, and I don't know how. I mean, aside from the fact that his name is literally Lazarus,
Yeah.
like which
That's
I
a little
mean,
too on
just
point.
yeah, but I mean, just based on the events that happened, it's like, oh, where'd this guy come from? Oh, wait, what
Mm.
if he's that guy?
I mean, I
Mhm.
was surprised by it, but like surprised in like case like 7, like not at the
Yeah,
end. Like
yeah.
I, I figured it out like way before that. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do overall, I kind of love that the plot was willing to get that kind of goofy. And, with all the murders that happened, there's some serious stuff, but at the end of the day, sometimes the hornies just kind of get the better of you, and you get shot with a cannon that your nephew won by gambling.
And I love how you
That's a
can
good life
see like
lesson.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can even see it like there's a ship out on the harbor and you can see it's missing a cannon. So it all like it's all part of the world and it's just amazing.
Yeah,
Uh,
agreed. I had a couple more positives I'll throw out here. Finish my list off. One, I liked that the cases within the world, like some of them had kind of red herrings that they were there to maybe throw you off a little bit. Just it wasn't purely just like find all the things and put it together. There were a lot of pieces of information that you really didn't need or that were there to throw you off a little bit, which I enjoyed. I also really liked the system of like how you found the clues in the world, the words with the little like flashing light that would pop up over things, so you kind of knew where to click and where things were, and it would stay lit if there was a word that you hadn't discovered in there yet. Now there's a negative to that I'll get to in a second, but I did like that. And the last positive for me here to clear my list off is I didn't while I was playing the game necessarily, but in retrospect, I really enjoyed the goofy case names they came up with for each of the chapters that were just like the murder at the intoxicating dinner party or whatever, they just had all these little fun names to what the scenario was. So,
yeah.
anybody else have positives
Um,
not mentioned
I mean,
here?
I would just like the concept of the puzzles themselves. I did enjoy that. That's something that you're basically just it's just a process of elimination and just using logic, which really kind of fits into my wheelhouse. It's something I enjoy doing. So, just the base concept of solving the puzzles was enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they were different too. Like I said, each case had like, anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 different pieces to the tableau, and it was like one was always like, here's the summary of the plot, but then there was like, who said this or who said that or who killed this person or what happened in this order, or there was always like
Who
some
sleeps
other
where
things you
or
were
yeah.
trying to figure out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other things are there to help you figure out the narrative, like,
Mm.
because you can only fill in the left-hand panel, which is like the narrative, and it would be considered solved without having filled in the other ones. I don't know if you
That's right.
put that
That's
together,
true.
but so
Mhm.
it is. I mean, I think you were talking about this earlier, Cody, about how like if you solve one part of it, that will lead to the next one. Like I feel
Hmm.
like that's part of the game design is these different parts of the thinking panel, as it's called, are really there so that you can kind of like, solve, fill in one thing, which can help you fill in the next thing, which ultimately helps you fill in the main narrative of what actually happened there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it always felt like there was one panel that was somewhat easy, and then that usually gave you some hints to figure out one of
Yeah.
the other ones. So you could kind of work your way through them all.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I just think the design of the gameplay in general, I think is pretty ingenious.
Okay.
I
Well,
have something to
sounds
say
like.
on
Oh, go
I
ahead,
have something to
Justin.
say on the I was going to say I have something to say on the panels, but not all of it's positive,
Well,
so
let's go to the negatives. Here we go.
I'm
Time for negatives. Kick it off, Justin.
uh I was going to slot this into the neutral category, but okay, if you insist.
Oh, okay.
So well, I
I'll
mean,
slot it into your neutral category.
Hey-o.
I mean, I liked
Talk
the
about a
panel.
demilitarized zone.
Okay, I liked the panel setup overall,
Do you
except
have a
for
case for my golden idol?
Hey-o.
uh, okay, try to actually get through the sentence now. Um, except for like later on in the game, and especially in some of the DLCs, where I mean, there was a bit of this in the base game too, so I feel I can talk about it here. Where it's like you'll be just given this screen full of blank spaces, and it's like, oh no, this is going to take forever. And then you realize, oh, in this section they just used the exact same phrase like 3 times, and that really kind of cheapened the experience for me. It would be like, oh, it's just Peter Batsley used he was in the drawing room or whatever, and then somebody found Peter Batsley in the drawing room, and then later on a corpse was found by Peter Batsley in the drawing room, that sort of thing. It just kind of felt like filler that didn't necessarily need to be there at certain times. So that tarnished the whole filling in the Mad Libs filling in the panel section for me a little bit. So it just felt like they could have tightened it up or like used slightly different prompts occasionally.
All right, what else we got here for negatives? One of mine, I will confess, there was a lot of cases that seemed to put some emphasis, and I'm pretty sure some of this was also partially red herring because I don't think it was that important, but there was a lot of emphasis on the symbols on the actual golden idol in this game as far as what like spell or power or whatever it was being used for. I didn't care about any of it, nor did I really use any of it.
Yeah, you really don't need much of that. And that was...
I had a lot of notes regarding those.
Yeah, I was like, oh God, at some point it's going to expect me to know like these 10 or 20 different spells or whatever. And yeah, you really don't ever need to know how to do that.
And building off of that, one thing that kind of got to me is like, okay, the game starts off really, really cool with it's like, what does it do? What can it be used for? And then for the majority of the cases where the idol actually plays a part, it does like the same 2 or 3 things. Especially by the time you get to the DLCs, it's like, oh, okay, someone used the idol to drain someone's life again. It's just it got to feel kind of samey, like they could have done a little bit more with the concept.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah.
I did on a random note, as long as we're talking about the idol, I did like the fact that there's like a switch on the idol. I don't know why that amused me. It's like, because you would think it would just be like all, mystical, like you just say a spell and it does a thing, but you have to like just turn it to like the right glyph or whatever, and then just like press a switch to get it to do the thing.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting.
I was gonna say, one thing I did have as kind of a negative was that there were definitely times where the story felt like pretty loose. Like there was these large time gaps, and then it felt like the pieces didn't necessarily fit together. Like it was like a kind of a random story that kind of fit with, it was like the same characters kind of in the same story, but like also it didn't really necessarily give you information on how those fit together exactly. And even there's some of the scenes themselves kind of just felt kind of jumbled together at times.
Yeah, and even like we're doing spoilers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so even extending to the ending, like it's like, oh, we've everyone behind like events, we've established this we've gone from a secret society to this overwhelming political force, yay, and it's terrible for everybody involved, including the ones who made it, yay. And then at the end, a few people get killed and that's enough to shatter the entire thing, yay. And largely it gets resolved off camera and everything's fine again, yay. It did feel like a lot happened kind of off screen that I would have liked to have seen more in front of me. So
I think this is, I mean, not exactly the same, but one of my complaints I had too was just, and this also extends to the DLC a little bit, so criticism there as well, but some of the story elements in some of the cases were just a little too fantastical. So when either I would discover or brute force like a few of the elements I didn't know, my reaction was always like, well, how the hell did that happen like that? Like, how was I supposed to know, Johnny Brojo shit a gold brick? How was I supposed to know that happened in this?
I don't think I remember that case.
Oh, that might have been another DLC.
There's the third DLC.
You might have missed that one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there definitely were some times where I solved something, not because the evidence pointed me in that direction, but just because it was the only possible way that things could fit together. and then like after I solved it, I looked back and I was like, why would I have chose that? There's nothing here to to make me pick that. I just did it because it was the only possible way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, agree. Other negatives. What else do we have here? You guys all loved it so much. You don't have any more negatives? One of mine, I'll say too, this is one I said I'd bring up later, was I loved the little glowing light system for the hints. My only criticism on that is I wish if you found like a note on a table and it had 3 clues on it, but you already had like one of the 3, that it would already have marked that as found instead of being a new unfound clue, because then if you added the 2 that you didn't have to your tableau and then left, like it still continued to glow and be like, there's a clue over here. So then you'd go back and look at it again and I already have this clue, but it just wasn't marked off on this particular note. So I always made sure to click every little thing, but I think they could have cleaned that up a little bit by just being like, oh, you already have that one. Like it's pre-clicked.
Yep. Or conversely, like especially in the conversations where something someone said would have like 4 different keywords you needed to find. And it's like, I swear, towards the end, especially, there were a couple of times where I thought I had found everything, but I was missing like one word, and all the glowy lights looked like they were, already places I'd looked. And I just kept overlooking one word inside a conversation inside, that I had to, click on to see. And it felt like, I do agree with you. It felt like they could have made it a little bit more directed in terms of where you still needed to look.
Well, it appears we have lost a little Pip here, but we'll see if we can get a little Pip back here.
Oh, little Pip.
That's my background, but you can't tell. Just little Pip's chest.
Oh, I get it now.
That was actually one of my favorite stories within a story, where you're trying to figure out where everyone sleeps at the Cloudsley mansion, and it's just like, okay, this person goes here, this person goes here, and I didn't even notice the crawl space at first, and when I did, I'm like, oh no, is that where little Pip sleeps? And I put his name in, and it's like, you're correct. I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
a little
poor
space
little
over the kitchen.
yeah. You
Poor
steal
little
that
guy.
cigar, little Pip. You
There's
steal it and smoke it.
fire in the
smoke it.
kitchen. You're dead, little Pip. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But,
well, does anybody else have negatives? Because I've talked about a couple of those cases quick also here. You have more negatives, though. Feel free to throw them out.
Most of my remaining ones have to deal with the DLC. I don't know if we're at that point yet. So,
You got any more negatives for the game, Brett?
Yeah, like kind of piggybacking off of the last thing I said about evidence sometimes only there's only one possible solution, but the evidence doesn't actually point that way. It's just I felt there was, especially in some of the later cases, like the latter half of the main game, there either just wasn't evidence. Either I wasn't seeing the evidence or it just wasn't there. And there was like times I was like, well, there's got to be something here to like point me to this. And like I said, even after I like figured it out, I would go back and look, and I couldn't find evidence to like support it. So I don't know if that's a game design, if you're supposed to just use your imagination as much as possible, or if it's lazy writing. I'm not sure which way that would fall.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like an example, because I know there were a couple of things that
Yeah.
seemed sort of.
I agree. It was the further the game went on, there were a couple times like that where it was just like something didn't make sense, or I don't know how I was supposed to arrive at that conclusion.
And when you've got like a cast of 20 people, and you haven't seen some in like 4 cases, and you're trying to figure out like who had the tattoo on his back of the 2 eyeballs, and who was, it did get a little convoluted at times.
Yeah.
I do agree.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'll just put a quick plug in here. I just went through the pictures of the cases earlier before we went on the air. Some of my favorite ones that we went through in chronological order here. The first one I put down that I really enjoyed was that scuzzy Little Mermaid bar where the guys had the card game going on and there was like the bedrooms upstairs. I really enjoyed that one quite a bit with the dialogue from the card players and the fiddler and the barkeep, who was like the most grizzled character in the game, was just like, I don't fucking care, whatever. Somebody murdered somebody, I'll have to clean it, whatever. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. And then next one I really liked was the one at the house that you guys just mentioned, the intoxicating dinner party where you
Oh,
were
yes.
figuring out all of the staff and what their secrets were and where they slept and then who was trying to poison whom. And it was,
That was pretty good. Yeah.
And who was sitting where at the table. That part I thought was just
yeah,
chef's kiss. I mean, because this person won't drink alcohol, but this person won't eat meat, and this person bribed the butler to switch seats with this other person.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was cool. That was really cool.
That one I enjoyed. I liked the one at the interrupting weekend at the doctor's salon with all the people at the party at the house, and there was all the like sub locations around the house, and you had to figure out kind of who was where and which of the multiple characters that were on drugs at the time were causing the problems. Oh my God.
Yep. And then like tying in the side effects of the drugs listed to like their facial tics and stuff, or if they had if their eyes were red, and yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. That one threw me off though, because I didn't there was like a part to it I didn't get right away, so that one threw me off quite a bit. Because I think the person that ended up being like the villain was not who I thought the villain was going to be on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also liked just the last one here for me that I mentioned was the Triumph of Order, which was that last one with like the math problems you were talking about, when they were trying to calculate everyone's misdeeds that they did in life and how many years are knocked off their life as a sentence for their problems that they had. And I thought that one was kind of fun too.
Yeah, it got very Orwellian in that
Yeah.
section.
And you guys have any other ones that you really enjoyed from the original cases?
You hit most of the main ones for me. I'm trying to think of like ones I really didn't like from the main game. Just like as a contrast. I will say I had trouble with the one where everyone was wearing masks. I mean, go figure. You can't tell who the hell anyone is.
Oh
at a
yeah, the
glance.
initiation one or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't actively dislike it. I mean, it was interesting. It made me really think about how to determine who anyone is in different ways, which I liked. But God, I was stuck on that one for a bit.
Yeah, that one was fun because you had to figure out like which rank they were and what part of the society they were. But then like the weird twist in that one was like I was like, why is that the solution for half of this one? I don't.
Mm,
Yeah. So I think
yeah.
that is where the logic began to just fray a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. On its face, that one was kind of like a really kind of straightforward, like, well, A and B can't equal C, so C and D must be F, kind of
Mhm.
thing. But
But
yeah,
person
I think
H
you're
couldn't
right.
be holding object I, and yeah, it's just
Yeah. But you're right. There also was like a bit of that one where something just was missing a bit, and it was I got stuck on that one for it as well.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any comments left about the base game? Should we rate these at all at the end,
Um.
or should we rate them as we go?
Well, I mean, in the interests of giving Joe a chance to maybe get power again,
Yeah.
maybe we should rate him at the end.
Sounds good.
That'd be
Okay.
fair.
Yeah.
All right. Joe just sent me some ratings as well. So.
Oh, okay. So we can do them now if you'd prefer. You're the host.
Well, maybe we should just to differentiate thoughts between the main game and the DLC. So let's take a look at ratings here for the original game, The Case of the Golden Idol, and then we'll talk about our DLC experience right after that. So I'll go first. I just say I really enjoyed this one. And I think that, like I said, the highest praise I can give it is just that idea of like I was actually stopping things I should be doing to go back and play this game again because that's how excited I was to actually spend time with it and its mechanics and its world. And we just kind of went over all the pros and cons on this one, so I don't have too much to add there. But I just thought again, similar to when we did our podcast on Chance of Sonar, this was a really different style of game than what I usually play. Definitely one that I enjoyed quite a bit. I'm happy I was along on this one. And like I said, in our most anticipated games, I'm really looking forward to the sequel to this one. So just as purely the base game on this, I am going to drop a very high 9 out of 10 on this one. Really, really enjoyed my time with it and how the detective work played out in the game. So that's me.
Wow. Okay, I guess I'll step up to the plate. I overall I really enjoyed my time with this one. It really made me think, which I always appreciate in a slower paced game like this, where it's not just, oh, the answers are really laid out for you and whatnot. This one actually did require a lot of outside the box thinking. Um, that said, as we mentioned, some of the logic did fray a bit towards the end. And I do feel that they could have done more with the idol instead of it always being like draining someone's life and making someone fly, or or blowing something up. Those are like the three things that it ever did. So good solid base, but they could have done more with it, and they could have done a little bit more in terms of variety. That said, I'm glad I played it. I'm glad it showed up on our radar. 7.5.
7.5.
Okay.
Rick, you want next?
Yeah, all right. This was a game that I had seen a small amount of it before we played. So I knew kind of like what I was getting into. And from that perspective, that's why I was like excited to get into it and try, because it looked like a lot of fun to do this kind of detective work and those logic puzzles. And yeah, I enjoyed like the first, I'll say about the first half of the cases I enjoyed. And then in the second half, things started sliding for me a bit. It definitely, as I've already mentioned, there were moments where I just could not find evidence to support what happened. And while I enjoy kind of being forced to think outside the box and kind of come up with your own possibilities of what happened, it also seemed like it didn't give you quite enough to build those stories off of. Like I could have come up with any story in the world to try and fit a scenario. And in some cases that might have actually been the truth because the truth was so outlandish, but I didn't have anything to support that. And so like one thing that just like a system that I use just kind of help determine whether or not I think a game is like worth it or enjoyable is like a cost, like a cost per hour ratio. So like basically if a game costs $50, I'm hoping to get like 50 hours of enjoyment out of it, like a 1-to-1 in general. And this game, I paid $13 for it on PC, and I cleared it in 8 hours. So it's, it was more than a 1-to-1 ratio as far as cost. So for my scale there, it was like kind of borderline like too expensive for the amount of time I spent with it. And another note I had on here was that like when the game ended and I was watching the credits, I was legitimately shocked to see how many people worked on this game or contributed to this game. Like the list of names like kept going, and I'm like, this felt like a game that like 1 or 2 people could have made by themselves. And there's like 20 people that like contributed to it. Now maybe some of those people, like lended a hand in some way, and so they felt obligated to put their name on there, but they didn't really weren't really main contributors. That's certainly possible.
Sure.
But at the same time, I was like, this is a full team of people that made this game. But maybe it's not the truth. I'm not certain, but just a note that I had on there was like, there was a lot of people, and I was surprised by that. And to wrap this up, I would say in our discussion here, I've actually bumped my score up a bit. I had it a bit lower. I'm going to end up giving this a 5 out of 10.
Oof.
Based on just basically primarily knocking points off for the fact that there just wasn't enough evidence. And I felt like there definitely could have put evidence in there, even if it was hidden evidence, like this like tangential stuff that maybe led you to a clue, would have been awesome, but it like just wasn't there for me.
Oh, why are you so wrong? All right.
Well, I do think it is important to say, building off of that, there really isn't any replay value to this. Like once you solve all the cases, that's kind of it. There's no real secrets to find. There's no like variation to the dialogue. Once you've played it through, unless you decide to come back to it years down the line where you've forgotten everything, there's really no reason to sit down and play it again. So that is something I think we should mention.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, story's not going to change. I mean, it's what it is.
Yeah, if you wait long enough that you forget the story, you could play it again.
Yeah. Or if you
factor that in,
try to go into it again with thinking there was a logical story, then also. But yes. All right. Joe's comments here on this one. Joe is not with us, dear listeners, because he has lost power mid podcast apparently at his house and somehow is unable to get back with us, which might be code for he's just drunk on a Sunday afternoon. But
he had the idol, the switch on the idol flipped to the wrong position.
He did say he said he had a case of the golden idols. I didn't know what that meant at first, but now I get it. Joe had left us no comments on the main game score, but he did for both of the DLCs. But he said simply, I really enjoyed the main game, and Joe gave this an 8.5 out of 10. So there's that. We'll work on an average here in a minute, but let's take a look at our DLC. So this game had 2 DLCs, which did everyone play?
I did not.
I did. Oh,
okay.
Perhaps you can deduce that based on the fact that I did necessarily enjoy the main game. I didn't feel necessary to go out and pay more money to play more of the same game.
Well, we should point that out because the DLC for this game was basically the same cost as the game itself.
Altogether.
But you're only getting like 6 more cases instead of the 12 from the original game. So there was that hesitancy as well, I guess. But we have 2 sets of DLC here. The first was called the Spider of Lanka, and the second is called the Lemurian Vampire, both of which had pretty cool names. So what's going to be in these? Let's find out. Here we go. Let's start with the Spider of Lanka. And I don't have as many notes on this one, but essentially this one took us back to before the other cases that we played through. This is earlier in time, to where essentially we had the discovery more or less of the idol on this one, yeah?
Yeah.
And also contained one of my absolute favorite stages of the entire experience, which was the overly enthusiastic card game tournament at the Yellow Lily, where 2 people walk into the bar or standing at the door to the bar, and there's just like a bar full of dead people, and you had to figure out how they all died and who killed whom, and it was actually quite fun to figure that one out, I thought.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, like who was holding what weapon, how did, where did they strike from, who died first, and like tracing it backwards. That was a hell of a good time.
Yeah, totally agree. This guy has a sword that doesn't have blood on it. This guy's sword does have blood on it. This guy has a gun with a bullet that's missing. I mean, that was a lot of fun, and basically a single location too. So
yeah, it's like this guy was known for having a temper, so it also was like who you had to figure out, like who won, who lost, who was, it was, it's so many layers to that first puzzle. It was fantastic.
Yeah, totally agreed. And then it all went downhill. What?
Oh
man.
I'll say the math puzzle later on was not my favorite, but I mean, this one definitely started out strong. I'll say that.
Yeah, this one started good, and then it wasn't.
Oof. I don't know. I disagree overall.
Yeah?
Because I mean, it did give us an interesting look at where the idol came from and the society that it had built up around it, or at least that the society that it found itself in. Because this DLC leaned really strong into that whole era of colonialism that we talked about in passing in as an element in the game.
This is true.
Where it's I think the main outside presence on this island is from he's a representative of the Seven Seas Trading Company. So like basically European, presumably British, conglomerate that's trying to establish a foothold for trade. And probably exploit the people involved, just because history is what it is. So I mean, having that element and seeing like how it was presented was neat to me, because the company sends a gift of this like horrible demonic looking statue, is like, this'll please those savages, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, there's some commentary going on here. So this is actually saying something instead of just being like, look at all the dead bodies and piece it together.
But look at all the dead bodies and piece it together.
I mean, there were a lot of dead bodies in this, and they died in a variety of interesting ways. Some of which were
okay.
easier
So
to put together.
the first one's the card game. That one
Yeah.
I enjoyed quite a bit. The second one actually here. So this is the unfortunate accident at the Raja's court. This one was cool because you had to figure out like what family people were from, like what tribe or area people were from, and they had some different customs with how they interacted with each other, with the roles they played and classes they played. So yeah, the second case actually wasn't too bad, but there were some weird things in this one that I thought made it very hard to solve.
Yes.
Isn't this the one where like the lady was dead in the middle of the trick thing in the middle of the ritual chamber?
Yep. And there was a whole like love triangle, like blackmail thing going on with her, and there was a lot of stuff with social standing and whatnot. I see that part I was fine with. It was the whole like who's going to be the heir to the throne kind of thing by solving this weird 4-dimensional math problem on on a clay tablet. It's like that part I didn't like as much. So that is one of the things I did brute force my way through, because you remember it was it was part word problem, part like for every third circle, rotate everything to the right and count all the horizontal lines. And meanwhile, there underneath it all, there's like this little diagram of like an MC Escher sketch kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know what any of this is.
I think
but
you worked
I know
too hard on
people
that.
Yeah, but it was by the end, I was like, I know the two people involved. I know one passed. I
Yeah.
know one failed. I'm just gonna keep swapping things around until it clicks. And I didn't like that, but that was like the low part of this DLC for me.
That part didn't bother me, but
Oh.
that part didn't bother me. But one of the other parts in this stage that did was this was also the one, if I remember, that had the like note you find that was like, I left you something in the mouth of the statue. But there's nothing
yeah.
you as the player can find in any mouth of any statue, because in the plot, in the game world, the character has already taken it out of the mouth of the statue. So
Yeah.
you're left to wonder like what was in the mouth of the statue, but that's never said. So like you run around like, I don't know what this really important thing is in the mouth of the statue because I can't
That's
literally
fair.
find anything.
Yeah. But like other elements of it, like trying to figure out like what ink came from what poisonous creature, and who wrote what notes based on the color of the ink they used, and like what poison may have been used based on stains in this area. It was I liked just how, I mean, yes, it had its shortcomings like the statue mouth thing and the math puzzle, but overall I liked how this case was constructed.
Did all that stuff matter though? Like I never did anything with the ink or any of the creatures. Or like it was.
Well, the girl who got crushed in the middle of the trick, as you put it, she
Yeah.
had ink on her hands because she had been trying to use the cricket or whatever it was, and because she got crushed, it got crushed, and then that kind of led to something else. I think this was a couple weeks ago that I played it, so I don't quite remember exactly, but I think
Okay.
it played in. Yeah.
That one felt
So
mildly convoluted to me, but the like figuring out the family stuff I thought was interesting.
yeah.
And then the third case is called In the Web of the Spider on this one. This one was also kind of wacky, where you have like a town more or less as your setting, and you can zoom in on the spots in the town, and you very quickly pick up like clearly somebody ran through this town and disturbed things as they're running through. So you had to kind of trace a route.
Mhm.
And I don't know, this one again was a little convoluted to me.
I felt like there were a couple of scenes you could zoom in on where they didn't add anything. Like you got a slightly different perspective, but there were no clues to find, and it didn't directly help you solve the case. But I liked the setup of like them trying to lie in wait for this person they're trying to ambush, and then the whole subterfuge switcheroo thing that happened in the house where he was, and that allowed this other guy to escape. I don't know. I liked this one too.
Yeah.
Despite a few rough edges. Yeah, I liked this overall setup.
Okay. Do you have any more comments on this one? Let's see what Joe say on this. This is kind of getting to his rating, but Joe said basically the Spider of Lanka was interesting, but a lot of the stuff felt unnecessary. He did like the new types of thinking panels that they added, but overall he thought it was a little lacking and a little frustrating.
There were parts, certainly. But as like a self-contained story, I thought this did a decent job. Yes, it had issues, but overall, just the flow of it, the new location. I don't think the idol was directly involved very much in this, which also kind of gave it an interesting character. So yeah, I liked the different approach, and yeah, I struggled with a couple of parts, but in the end, this was I enjoyed my time with this first DLC.
Okay.
So
I'll put a number on it.
sure, yeah. This is a little surprising for me considering it was a shorter experience, and especially with taking Brett's cost versus time into account here. I actually like this a bit more than the original game. It felt
Wow.
it felt more self-contained. It felt like it kind of moved at a better pace, and it was just a different, interesting setting. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, I for whatever reason this just clicked with me, and yeah, it is the strongest part of the game in my opinion.
Wow. Okay. So 8 out of 10 from Justin. I gave this expansion, well, I gave this a 7 out of 10. I did enjoy a lot about it. It's hard to rank a three-case expansion versus the original, I feel like, in all fairness here. But like I said, there, the first case I really enjoyed. Second case I had some elements I enjoyed. Third case I was not as crazy about. So I think that held it back a little bit for me there. Joe gave this one a 6.5 out of 10 for his score, basically with the comments I already mentioned. So there's that one as well. Then we move to the final DLC. Three more cases here. This is the Lemurian Vampire, and this one, in its own way, is kind of the weirdest of all the cases, I would say.
Hmm.
This one, you're toggling between three different time periods, same setting, but that made this one kind of unique feeling. Whether that was good or not, let's find out. So comments here on this one. So this is a kind of weird setup. We had this like weird statue off to the side of the village, which essentially contained the idol and had some kind of automaton or something inside of it, which was the quote unquote vampire sucking life out of people.
The original Chuck E. Cheese. Charles Edward Cheese.
Charles Edward Cheese. No, but
That's how I always kept thinking of it. Like as soon as I realized, oh, it's a mechanical automaton, it's just I could not get that correlation out of my head for some reason.
that's funny. Um,
But oh, this one, I applaud them for trying something new instead of just being like, oh, here's just more of the same. They attempted to add a new mechanic and spice things up. I personally felt it just made things more convoluted. Maybe that was just me, but it did give you a chance to see more of what happened as it was happening instead of just seeing the aftermath. So I guess there's that. But
yeah,
ooh, there was a lot to try and keep track of sometimes, and not all of it mattered.
agreed. This one had a lot of extra information. You had all the villagers that were set in this place. This is Monkey Paw Island, and then we have returning characters of Zubiri, Tissa, and Jianji who are added to these and like basically assimilate into the culture of this island as well, which is a weird ass place where they have all these rituals and what do they call the sentinel or the sentry or somebody that goes out to
Sentry, I
meet
think.
yeah, goes out to meet the quote unquote vampire,
Yeah.
the statue, the idol,
Hmm.
and
And they have this whole legend about how it comes down to terrorize the village, but it never actually leaves its tower in reality. And oh God, there was a lot to try to unpack in this.
yeah, it's like mind control going on, and there's all of these things. So this one had
Yep, and
three stages also here. I can't
mhm.
even really tell you the difference between these.
Well, it started off with the shipwreck and Zubiri, who was from the past DLC, and his crew, ending up on the island. The villagers trying to figure out what to do with them, and it kind of chronicles Zubiri's. It was Zubiri that ended up kind of rising to power on this island, right? He was the one who
I
ended
think
up,
so.
yeah. But the fact that I don't remember is kind of testament to how muddled all of this was. So I mean, it was basically them arriving, them getting a foothold, and then him becoming, king, emperor, whatever, and then things falling apart. That's kind of the three-stage act here, or
Okay.
three-stage play here. But oh man, there was so much about like who was in charge of what on in the society, and like what their votes were for various laws, and whether or not certain things should happen, and the fact that the kids are playing with gemstones like they're just toys, and just whether the cheese was poisoned or the honey was poisoned, or if this rat
Yeah.
is dead or just asleep, or
Who snuck in where? Blah blah
it
blah.
was it was a lot, and I don't know if it needed to be quite as much as it was.
Yeah. So the three cases here had 35 clues, 48 clues, and 48 clues on this one. Like it was like you had to open a separate window for the words because it was so many
Yep.
freaking words.
And this definitely had the worst case of reusing certain phrases in the panels, like so and so, the head of protecting children, just like that was used like 3 times, and just you could have just used their name and then used the rest of the space for something else. And yeah, this whole DLC, despite being objectively not really much longer than the first one, this felt bloated to me. Like there was just so much going on, and not a lot of it really felt important in the end. And again, we get the idol coming back into play more heavily, and yet it's still doing just the same things it was in the original game. This felt like a slog to me. I'm not going to mince words. DLC 2 just it was a chore to get through for me.
Now I'm just looking at the answers to the panels here. This is full spoilers, but like you have to solve what happened a long time ago after the arrival of the ship, and then in the tunnel. In the tunnel took me forever to get on this one, trying to
Oh,
solve.
geez. Yeah, because it's like, which part of this bridge was damaged, and
Yes.
who damaged it, and
Who had that one was too much because it was like you have to figure out who had the idol, who used the idol, who lost the idol, who picked up the idol, who then used the idol, who then did this. What did they do with it? What did the other
Yep.
person do with it? Who was a hostage? And you're just looking at it
Yes.
like they gave you 28 words in the sentence, but you had to fill in 32. So like over half of the sentences are blank on this, and it's just like fill in this sentence. And you're like,
Yep.
where do I even begin with that? One thing we didn't
Right.
mention this whole podcast is the clue locations on the tableaus are color coded with words that are color coded. So you kind of know where a character goes, where a object goes, where like an action goes.
Yeah.
But in these later cases, then they also started to like dual color code some of the spots. So it could have been a person or it could have been an object that goes there. And you're like, Jesus Christ, I don't know which one goes there.
Yeah, theoretically, I think that was supposed to make it easier, but it just made it made me even more hesitant to try things, because it's like, well, I thought I knew it was this person, but it's not letting me use that. So what action do I use instead, or what item do I use instead? And it was, yeah. And you could fill in a lot of them with just golden idol. I remember in certain
Yeah,
panels,
there
and
are
that really
spots where
also,
that's the case.
yeah, that also kind of diminished things for me, because it showed compared to a lot of the rest of the game, DLC and otherwise, it felt like it was like they just phoned this one in certain cases. Despite how complex and
Oh,
convoluted it was, it did feel like there wasn't as much effort put into the panels, at least.
yeah,
As there could have been.
terribly complex, unnecessarily complex, and switching between the three time frames back and forth was also very hard
Yep.
because you're trying
And
to
it's
figure out
like,
like who had changed anything in the village from point one to point two, and who's who, and did their
yep.
opinion change.
And
And
it's like, oh, this door is open now, but it was closed before. But so you need to find out who was here then to open the door, but they're now somewhere else in this time. But yeah, even just going back and talking about this, I've dropped my rating for this a little bit.
so, yeah, and one of the biggest problems with the story in this one, which we mentioned in our chat a long time ago, and Joe just re-mentioned in his text message here, is the short of it is there was a lady in the village who found this idol first and was using it to suck the life out of the sentry that would go every once in a while, and then she would use the life force on herself to keep herself young. So she was gaining like 40 years at a time, we figured out, and no one in the village noticed that this lady never aged, apparently, which was a huge problem with the story in this one.
Yeah, if they had worked that into the mythology somehow, like because there is like a bit of folklore, a bit of myth that goes into the story of the Sentry Sentinel, and then the dweller in the tower. If they had worked that in, that this ageless woman is also protecting the village somehow, that would have been fine. But they didn't. You're right, and that's just
This is
like
also why I'm curious, like why the sequel is going to be set in a more modern time if the idol broke at the end of the game, but it seems like this lady found it, and this is like way back at the beginning of the story here, so you could go back and like figure out where this came from. We still don't know the origin, do we, of this thing?
I mean, we know it's tied to like an ancient civilization that was very technologically advanced, and no one quite knows how their stuff works anymore. But beyond that, nope. So maybe it's a different idol. Maybe it's a different piece of their civilization that we find in the sequel. I don't know.
I mean, I kind of hope that they just keep the title, but don't even have a golden idol. Just like tell us good stories that are self-contained, and like somebody gets killed, and let us solve them with what's there, and like then you're not also tied to the idol having to be in the case.
Yeah, then it's in the golden idol universe, but it does its own thing. I would be on board with that.
That would be more fun for me, I think. But
yeah, instead of just, oh, this old geezer wants to never die and keep holding on to power, hashtag social commentary. And it just, you keep recycling that over and over again. Yeah, I'm done with that storyline. Please, for the second game, move on to something new.
Yeah. All right, would you give this second DLC here, Justin?
I'm just going to jump right in. 3 out of 10. I did not enjoy my time with this one. It was frustrating. It was way more convoluted than it needed to be. I appreciate they tried adding in that time mechanic, but it didn't really work as well as it should have. And God, there was so much incidental information that didn't actually matter. So this one, swing and a miss for them. I actively disliked this one.
Yeah. 3 out of 10. Okay, Joe said he thought this DLC was the weakest. Again, just trying too hard to introduce new mechanics at the expense of logic. He gave this a 5 out of 10 for his rating as well. And I think I wrote on mine up here that I gave this a 6 out of 10. And its best strength probably was just that it was set in the universe of the rest of the game, and it had kind of the same detective-y mechanics, although not anywhere near as well implemented in this case as the other ones. So sounds like we definitely agree this was the weakest part of the whole game.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I could fully recommend people playing this one. So
first DLC, go for it. Go nuts. It had some really solid cases, rough edges, but really enjoyable. This one, unless you find it on a deep sale or something and you really like how the rest of the game plays, I can't recommend the Vampire of Lemuria or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
You
got it. All right, any closing thoughts here, gentlemen? Doesn't look like we're getting Joe back for this one. He's gone forever. He forgot to use the idol the right way.
I feel like since Brett didn't do the DLCs, if he has any closing thoughts, I think he should kick us off on this.
Yeah. I just in general, I think the concept of the game, the way it was designed, I think was good. Like I say, I enjoyed a fair amount of it. I just felt like there were times when I got stuck and I shouldn't have been stuck. It wasn't like, it wasn't, it felt like it wasn't on my end, I guess is what I'm getting at. It wasn't that I couldn't figure it out. It just that there wasn't enough there to figure out. And it didn't, like, for me, it didn't fit what the intention of the game should have been, which is solving evidence, not making up an outlandish story myself.
That's
So
fair. Yeah, I liked the approach of this in that it did give you in an electronic form a pretty viable way to piece together a mystery and to try and figure out who done it. I mean, there probably are other ways that are even better, but this is an approach I hadn't seen before, and I liked what they did overall. Yes, sometimes they were very finicky in what words they wanted you to use to actually give them the answer they wanted, even when you knew what was going on. But that aside, it's a solid experiment. I am looking forward to the sequel. Like Cody said, I really hope that they do something beyond just focusing on the idol itself, and just give us interesting murders, interesting cases, interesting intrigue. But yeah. So I don't know if this is like the only game the studio has made, but if it is,
It's their first commercial one they've put out. The two guys.
Okay. It's a heck of an initial project. So if you're in the mood for something new and different, and you don't mind a bit of roughness around the edges, yeah, give this one a shot. It's not quite like anything else I've ever played.
Yeah, I just echo. I had a really good time with this one. Just like I said, the experience of solving even one little piece, one nugget of something in this, and then it leading to the next thing was kind of like a mystery solving domino effect, which was really fun once you figured out one of the panels, and then you could help work on the next panel from that. And each case had some different things to solve. You guys are right. There are some times where you get a little overlap with panel to panel, but in general, I found one when I solved it would definitely help me solve the next one. So I thought that was also really fun. And all the other things I mentioned, sound design. I know a couple people mentioned at the beginning, a lot of websites were really praising the sound design. And I know I read a couple things here that said, they had picked the music for the initial game, and then when they went to the other two DLC locations, they added in some native Asian sounds for the case that took place there, and then they also added in some native I don't know if it was Africa or wherever the other one was, but they tried to introduce local instruments based on what they were trying to get to as far as the setting, I guess. So
Cool.
that was pretty cool too. But I really enjoyed it also, so I would also tell people to definitely give this one a shot. And then I also had, just to close out here, just if you're listening to this and you're enjoying this, some other weak to strong recommendations for games like this. Obviously, they mentioned the return of Obra Dinn was their inspiration. I haven't played that one. I don't know if you two have. I know Dave has.
I keep meaning to. I just haven't sat down and actually given it a shot yet, but I've heard good things.
Is that the game that's black and white?
Yeah, it's on like a ship where you're trying to figure out how
Okay.
everyone died, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So there was a lot of disagreement I saw on websites as whether people preferred this game versus that game. I think if you like your mysteries to be in like self-contained nuggets, people generally seem to prefer this game. And I think that one is more like a big mystery that you're solving without necessarily like checkpoints to it.
Oh,
So it kind of depends which way you're looking.
okay.
Obviously, a sequel to this game coming out this year is called The Rise of the Golden Idol, so check that one out. And then other ones here I just put down. People recommended the Ace Attorney series. If you're interested in something somewhat similar, piecing together mysteries, you can check those games out. There's a lot of them out there. I don't even know how many now, 7, 8, 9, something like that. It's quite a few. And Justin can speak to this one because I still haven't played my copy, but they had mentioned the Danganronpa series as well.
Yep. Very different play style. I mean, it's still about solving murders, but very different setting, very much more surreal, much more cracked out, for lack of a better term, and much more action oriented. In that game, you are literally shooting holes in other people's arguments with what are called truth bullets. It's hard to really explain unless you played it, but Danganronpa, great series.
Truth Bullets is something that they made up on Fox News.
I mean, for all I know, the person behind Monokuma is like Bill O'Reilly.
I almost bought that Funko Pop the other day, but I didn't. Not the Bill
Bill
O'Reilly
O'Reilly?
one, to be clear, the one from Danganronpa. So, but I hadn't played the game yet, and I was like, I don't know this character, so I didn't do that. I don't have very many video game ones, but they don't make a lot of video game series that I play of them. But last recommendation somebody put on a Reddit board that I found, and I YouTube this. It is out there and might become my sick new obsession. We'll see. I might give it a shot. There is apparently a Korean game show called Crime Scene, which is available on YouTube with subtitles if you're interested, which apparently is the live action version of this game in its style. So contestants are trying to solve something similar in real time as a game show. So I haven't looked too much into it, but could be my next release, The Hounds. We'll see. Maybe it's something awesome like that. So
I am on board with that.
we'll have to check out Crime Scene, the Korean game show also. But all right, I think that's going to wrap us up. Joe apparently still does not have power at his house, so he is out at the moment. So we're going to end tonight by asking Brett if he could use the idol to steal 40 years off someone's life. Who would you pick and why?
Oh boy. Well, I probably would start with somebody over the age of 40. And to not be too cruel about it.
Baby killer.
Actually, no, that's not how that works. It doesn't. So it would be like making them older. So I would have, so maybe I would pick somebody like, maybe like aim low. I was going the wrong way on that. So maybe like, so I'll just go to some orphanage and find some kids, and because this is gonna relieve the stress on the system as well, because these kids are now old enough to go out on their own. See, so they're 40 years old like instantly, and they can just go do their own work, like get in the workforce, help out the rest of us. And I mean, I'm nice and young now, so they can start paying me money, and
freeloaders.
You just found a great system here. I like this.
Yeah, so that make you super, super young at the time.
Yeah.
That's
everything
great.
wins. Everybody wins in this.
Everybody wins in this. All right. Brett, what if you were stealing the 40 years from the kid and you found out that there was a secondary thing that the idol did to them as well, unfortunately? What effect would it also give the kids, and how would that play out with them now being old?
I mean, it might, I don't, I honestly don't know. He's struggling with that one. I've got nothing for that.
Justin, what side effect would it give them?
Well, I think in the interest of fairness, they would have to give them something that they could use to exact their revenge on suddenly being old and having their backs hurt all the time, and not ever getting a good night's sleep, having to worry about mortgages, etc. So I am going to say that in exchange for their life, we mentioned someone pooping a gold brick earlier. It would let them excrete gold, so they would at least get something out of it.
Wow.
Ooh, okay.
Could be painful depending on how that plays out.
I mean, I'm not the ancient society that made the idol, Cody.
But that is what they call the curse of the golden idol. There we go. Full circle.
Full circle.
Oh my goodness. All right, everybody. I think we have some upcoming pods, looks like, on some video games, and maybe also some music coming up here as well as we get into season 3 here in February. Until next time, this has been Cody. I'm here with Justin and Brett, and Joe is trying to find a way to get power back apparently at the moment. So we'll reserve making fun of him, other than to say hopefully he doesn't get power back and he has to live in a cave someplace.
That he finds the golden idol and uses it to train our youth.
Yeah,
you don't want that, Cody.
I think he's been doing that for years. It's called Cinemasters. Cinemasters is the golden idol. That's the joke.
Oh, it makes so much sense.
It does make so much sense. All right, everybody. This has been the Fawn Pod, the Fawncast. Friends occasionally, not disagreeing. Take care. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
See y'all.